Praise the Lord. It's always good to be in his house. First of all, we just want to thank you for supporting us for about the past 10 years. You faithfully supported us. I know that you pray for your missionaries. You are doing so much across the world to spread the gospel. So we want to thank you for that. It was in December of 1995 that we got on a plane with our two little girls, ages 1 and 2, and we headed to the country of Niger, West Africa. Niger was a country of 18 million people, 99% Muslim, and at the time, it had only been open for people to have the choice to become Christians for a little less than 5 years. We joined a team of International Assemblies of God missionaries, and we began preaching and teaching and sharing God's love with 18 million people that the majority of them had never yet heard one time who Jesus Christ was, how he had died on the cross so that they might be saved from their sins. In those years, we got there, we started working, we loved the work we were doing doing open-air crusades. We saw God's power in so many ways as he healed the sick, he opened blind eyes, he straightened out crippled legs, he raised people up off of their deathbeds. We knew that our God was a powerful God, and he gave us favor. We were able to plant 5 churches between 1995 and 2004. We saw God work in so many mighty, mighty ways. But you know, for all of our lives, there are those things that happen. They become dates that mark us, dates that we never forget. And I truly believe that May 11th of 2004 was a day that Satan intended to destroy our family. Our girls were 9.5 and 11 years old at the time. We were involved in ministry. I was starting Bible clubs all over the country. Brent was teaching at the Bible school, pastoring churches, seeing God move in a mighty way. And to us, May 11th was just an ordinary day. But Satan wanted to destroy it. But instead of that day being a day where we'd mourn, a day of sorrow, a day of defeat for our family, our God, who is all-powerful, has turned that day into a day of celebration.
So on that day, I was going to leaving the capital city of Niamey, and I was going up to a small town called Tilbury. We had planted a church up there, and so I picked up a couple of our student pastors from the Bible school, had their wives, and 3 children. One was a baby, and we are headed up. Most of the country doesn't have good roads. 2/3 of the country is Sahara Desert, but this actually happened to be a good road, so I was enjoying actually driving 60 miles an hour. And I'm cruising up the road. It's going to be a great, evening with in ministry up there at this new church. And I noticed this truck that's like right behind me, and he's acting like he's wanting to pass, yet there's no oncoming traffic. So I slowed down a little bit and gave as much room as I could to let this crazy driver behind me pass me. And only when he gets alongside me, he doesn't pass. He's like matching my speed. So I look over to see what's going on, and the passenger window is rolled down, and I see these guys with turbans on, and here's an AK-47 pointed at me, and it's the next lane over. I don't have an opportunity at this moment to do anything. He begins to shoot. The first bullet from that machine gun comes through my Toyota Land Cruiser door and straight through my left knee. I had a hole you could have put a finger through. My pants actually caught fire. I remember putting the fire out and yelling, "I'm hit," and realizing that 1/3 of my knee is now on the dashboard. Before I can do anything, another bullet comes through, and it takes out all the flesh in the bottom part of my leg all the way to the bone. And at that point, I'm now realizing I have to stop this vehicle, or all of my people are going to die in this car with me. And so my focus, in my panic, I don't know why, this was not an automatic vehicle. I slammed on the brakes, but just out of habit, I also slammed on the clutch. And I slammed on the clutch with this leg that just received 2 bullets. So I probably did more damage to my leg than the bullets did, because when I slammed on the clutch, and I slammed on the clutch because my tire tracks where I stopped on the road, you can still go to Niger and find them. They're still there. but I came to a skidding halt. But when I did that, I forced the tibia up in the femur. I split my femur vertically, and one part of it broke off, and so now my bone's in 3 pieces, and this leg's now 6 inches shorter than the other leg. But I got the car stopped, and because it was in the afternoon, we'd pass cars on the road, so I'm just thinking, okay, if these guys want our vehicle, they want our money, they can take all of that, but if we can stay near the road, in 5 to 10 minutes, we'll have help. And so I'm trying to get out of the car. Well, they had stopped as well, but because I slammed on the brake, they had shot past us. And now the man that had shot me, he jumps out of that vehicle. There's another man in the back of the truck that has a machine gun on us, and he comes running back to where I am. At this point, I've gotten out of the car. I'm on one leg, and he tells me to get on. He shoves me into the back seat on the laps of my passengers. And he takes over the car, and we go off into the desert, and the other vehicle follows. We go a couple miles into the desert, and it's rough terrain, and I didn't know I could hurt that bad. I'm begging this guy to stop the car because every bounce that he's doing is just killing me. And so he finally stops. They get us all out, and I'm in this laying in the sand, and they're taking everything we have. I remember handing him my wallet covered in my blood, and they took everything we had. And then the guy that shot me, and these were 3, we found out later that these were 3 agents with Al-Qaeda of the Islamic Maghreb. And so the guy that shot me, he wants to finish us off. He doesn't want to leave any witnesses. Well, they get into a debate among themselves, these 3 guys, because the one guy, he said, I didn't sign on to kill babies. And the fact that we had those 3 children in the car with us is probably one of the reasons I'm here today. But they start arguing over that. And then my Bible school students see that there's an opening. So they're like, if we're going to negotiate for our lives, now's the time to do it. So they start talking with these guys, and they're telling them, you've made a big mistake. They said, you have shot a malam, which in the Islamic world is a preacher. They didn't say what kind of preacher I was, but basically you've shot a holy man, a preacher, and now you're in trouble with God. And they said, if you kill all of us, you'll be cursed to the 4th generation. Well, I'm their Bible school teacher. I didn't feel like it was the time to correct theology or, because what they were saying was like really getting through to these guys. I could see their faces. And so I'm like, okay, it's working, And so the one guy says, let's not waste any more ammunition. And he's dead anyway, pointing at me. And so then they get in their vehicles, they get in my vehicle and their vehicles to leave us. They've taken everything that we have. And this one guy that shot me, he's still so determined to finish me off that he takes my vehicle and he plans to run me over. I can't walk, I'm laying there. And the 2 student pastors grabbed me and pulled me out of the way, and the tires of my car brushed the bottom of my feet as they took off. And now here we are in the middle of the desert with nothing. One of the pastors who had some first aid training took, thank God that African women like to wear head ties and scarves and stuff. So he took the head tie off of one of the wives, and they tied a tourniquet on my leg. The 2 guys tried to carry me. One guy was tall, one guy was short, and I'm not exactly lightweight. And anyway, I said, you guys, they tried to pick me up, and it was hurting too much. I said, fortunately, I didn't have them try to carry me, because the main artery had just been missed by like a millimeter. All those bones that were broken in there were sharp. So I said, just leave me here. One of you stay with me, and the others hike back to the road. So they're leaving, and I'm now assessing my situation, realizing how impossible it is. I have to explain something to you. At that time in Niger, may still be the case today, but at that time in Niger, I could have been shot in the parking lot of the National Hospital in front of the emergency room and not gotten treatment in time. I'm just explaining the medical situation there. And here I am out in the middle of nowhere, and I'm thinking, okay, if I'm a driver on that road and these people hike back to the road with blood all over them, trying to get someone to come off road, nobody's coming off road. And the nearest gendarme station, that's like our state troopers, but the nearest gendarme station is 45 minutes away. So they're going to drive there, they're going to inform them, they're going to inform their national headquarters, they'll have to do whatever, and there's protocol. And I'm thinking, the earliest I'm going to get help is in 3 hours. And I will have bled out before then. And I'll be honest with you, I was not happy with Jesus. I have come to this hot place. I mean, the average temperature there is 120 degrees. I've done everything Jesus has asked me to do, and I'm going to die like this in the middle of the desert. And you know, there's things that happen in our lives that we dislike, like that mess up our schedule, flat tires, breakdown, schedule change, things that happen that we don't like. Well, now I'm asking the Lord why he didn't create something like that for me that day. Lord, why did you not why did my car start this morning? You could have kept me off of this road. I think when we get to heaven, we're going to be surprised at how the devil tried to kill every one of us every day of our life. And that those things that we found so inconvenient were actually God saving us from something. But here I am complaining, and then I realize Jesus is going to be able to answer all your questions in about 30 to 40 minutes. Do you want to go into heaven murmuring and complaining? And I began to worship the Lord in that moment, in that pain, in that impossibility. And I had a peace that came over me that I cannot describe to you. An unbelievable, divine peace. Of course, I misinterpreted the peace. When I felt that peace, I was like, okay, this is it. I mean, I'm getting ready to go through the pearly gates. The peace has come upon me. And so I started thanking the Lord for saving me, for the privilege I've had of serving him and participating in his mission. And then at that moment, lots of stuff that you think are important in life are not important. And that's when I realized that for me, at that moment, the only things that were important were my relationship with Jesus and my family and people that I was connected to. And so I prayed and I asked the Lord to take care of Shelly and the girls. And as I was praying and asking the Lord to take care of them, the Lord spoke to me in an audible voice like I'm speaking to you tonight. And he just asked me a question. He said, Brent, who told you your mission is over? Well, being a great man of faith who just heard the audible voice of God, I said, Lord, if you want me to serve some more, I'm willing to do it, but you need to do some miracles in a hurry. I'm dying here. What I didn't know is the first miracle had already happened. About 5 minutes after the Lord spoke to me, I hear the sound of an engine, and here are federal troopers coming to my rescue. It's only been 15 minutes since I was shot. I'm trying to figure out where they came from. You got to understand, highway patrol in West Africa doesn't patrol the highway. So where did they come from? I mean, I'm shocked. And I found out later that there was an anonymous phone call made to the National Gendarmerie over 30 minutes before I was ever attacked by Al-Qaeda, informing them that I had been shot, critically wounded, and giving them the coordinates of where I'd been dumped in the desert. On the official police report in Niger that's on record, they could not match up the timeline. They talked with the villagers, they talked with the witnesses. Everybody gives the same time of attack, but they know when that call was registered at their call center. And so on the official report, their report conclusion is, we cannot explain this timeline except for God was with this man. They get me to this small town that we were going to a clinic. Normally doesn't even have a doctor. They take me there, and I asked one of the guys with me, I said, go find a phone and call my wife and tell her what's happening.
So we'd been in ministry the entire week before, and so I had decided to take my girls, and we were going to go have a little fun day at the pool. Well, it's there that I get this phone call. You have to understand the West African culture. You never, ever, ever announce the death of a loved one by phone. You say they're seriously hurt, or they were seriously injured. And so this is the message I get. Brent has been shot, and he is seriously hurt. So I don't know if my husband is hurt, and even if he is seriously hurt, can he survive, or is he already dead? So I recognize and I know when I get that phone call, I don't know. But as I began to just call out to God, there was a peace that came over me. And just this assurance that I would continue ministering with my family in Niger. I remember calling my mother that day. I called her. I said, Mom, I just got a phone call and Brent's been shot. She was talking with me. She prayed with me. And I said, please pray because I need to call Brent's parents and I have to tell them what's going on. I'll never forget calling and getting Brent's dad on the phone. They were working at Global University at the time. They were missionaries for 40 years. And I called and I said, I just got a phone call and everything's going to be okay, but Brent's been shot. And I remember my father-in-law, he said, is he alive? And I said, yes. And he's like, how do you know he's alive? And I said, I just feel it. I just believe God is going to take care of him. Within 30 minutes, I began to get phone calls from all over the world because my parents, my in-laws, they began to share with everyone. And there was prayer chains going throughout the entire world praying for Brent. And we knew that God was with us. And we felt that.
And so I'm in this clinic, and be honest with you, I'm glad to be alive, but this is not where I want to be. And they've put me, it's not even on a bed, I'm on this cement table, and this guy goes to work on me, cuts my pants leg off, and when I see the leg, I'm like, oof. I mean, I'm glad to be alive, but I'm not keeping that. It was ugly. And this guy's going to work. I mean, he's stopping the bleeding, and then everything that's in a car door was in my leg. So he's pulling out metal and foam and plastic and all this stuff. And I realized this guy's like really good. And so I looked at him, and I'm like, are you a doctor? Because they have like a doctor that comes through every 3 months there. They have a nurse on duty. And he looked at me, he said, well, I'm more than a doctor. I'm the man that's going to save your life. And he says, you're a lucky man that you got shot this week. I'm like, okay. A little odd. And I'm like, how so? And he said, well, I'm a military officer. And he said, I'm probably the only person in the country who could save your life because he said, I'm a gunshot trauma specialist surgeon. And he said, I'm not supposed to be here. He said, we've got engagement going on with rebels and stuff on the Chadian border. And I was supposed to go there. And some clerk made a typographical error and sent me to the Mali border. So he said, I'm 2,000 kilometers from where I'm supposed to be. But he says, he said, how it is with paperwork, it's taking a whole week to get this corrected for me to go to where I'm supposed to be. So he said, you got shot on the right week to have the right guy to save your life. Well, when he said that, I realized I told God he needed to do some miracles in a hurry. He had already done the miracles a week ago, days before. And that's when I realized, okay, God's doing something here. And I was grateful. And this man built a brace and all this stuff. And then third miracle, now this is going to sound strange to you, but the third miracle was they actually had a working ambulance. I mean, I've been going up and preaching in this town for 2 years, and their ambulance, old ambulance, was sitting there like a decoration in front of the clinic on cinder blocks. But the government had bought a brand new ambulance, and it's there ready to transport me to the capital city. And so they put me in this ambulance, and we head to before we leave, I'm in the ambulance, I'm ready to go, I'm expecting it to go, but it's not going. And the door opens, and it's the governor of the province, and he tells me, Pastor, he says, we're doing everything we can to get your car back. We're in pursuit of Al-Qaeda. I said, thank you very much. And then he leaves, and I'm still there. About 5 minutes later, the door opens, and I forget his name, but it's a colonel who's commander of the Northern Forces, and he says, just want to assure you we're doing everything we can to recover your vehicle. I have my troops in pursuit. I said, thank you very much. About 5 minutes later, the door opens, and it's one of my pastors, and he opens the door, and he says, everything's going to be okay. And I said, before you shut the door, I'm glad that everyone's looking for my car, but why is this vehicle not moving? And he says, we've got it worked out, Pastor. He said, there's no gasoline in town, but he says, we have located some, and you'll be moving shortly. I want you to understand tonight all that God had to do to save me. And all that God has to do, we don't even realize all that God does for every one of us to be saved, and all that God is willing to do for everybody in this world to have an opportunity to know Jesus. And they put me in that ambulance, And as we're coming into the capital city, the ambulance driver leans over his head and he says, Pastor, where am I taking you? I said, does someone have a cell phone? He says, yeah, you can use mine. I said, let me call my wife. And so I called Shelly to find out where the ambulance is supposed to take me. And this is the first time for her to hear my voice and to have confirmation that I actually am alive.
So at this point, it had been 4 hours since I had gotten the phone call that he had been shot. I had started making preparations by faith. And you know, God, he gives us favor. He had put incredible people around me that were there to help. We had a lady that was connected with the military hospital. She had helped us to set up. The doctors were already waiting, ready for Brent to arrive. I was at the embassy. We were doing reports. I was getting as much information as I could for them, but waiting and not knowing if he was alive, waiting. I can remember I was trying to talk to the embassy people, and I had a hard time speaking because I was shaking all over because I was so scared. But after 4 hours, my phone rings, and I pick it up, and it's Brent. And I know for the first time now, I know that he is alive. And I remember I told him, they're ready for you at the French military hospital. Just go there, and I'll meet you there. The embassy personnel put me in their vehicle, and we took off for the hospital. When we arrived, the ambulance was already there. They had just taken Brent out. And as I walked up to the doors of the hospital, I followed a trail of Brent's blood to the room where they had him. I walked in there, and the doctors and nurses were taking care of him and working. He was very white. He was conscious, never did lose consciousness throughout all of this, which is a miracle. And they did x-rays, and they told me, they said, it's very serious. We need to get him to France out of Africa. We need to get him somewhere else. He needs to be evacuated, but first we have to operate on him. And we can't do that here, but we need to go to the National Hospital. Well, as Brent already said, the National Hospital was not a place we wanted to go. It did not have a good record, but you do what you have to do. So in the few years before this happened, we had actually been bringing medical teams out and had been working with the National Hospital staff. And in fact, God had given us so much favor that at one point we had a hospital that was closing down in the States that had donated all their materials to the National Hospital, and we'd been able to outfit all of their surgery rooms at the National Hospital. Now, when we outfitted it and put this nice modern equipment there, we had no idea that we would be the ones that would need to be using it. But God knew before it ever happened. It was about 3 a.m. that they took Brent into surgery. And you have to understand, in West Africa, that generally, when you go into surgery, they give you a list, a piece of paper with all the medication, all the supplies, the bandages, antiseptic, the sutures, everything that they're going to need in surgery, and you're responsible to go buy all that stuff. It's 3 a.m. There are only 2 pharmacies in the entire capital city that are open, and there's no guarantee I'm going to find everything he needs. But God, again, in his favor, put wonderful people around me. We spread out. We were able to get everything. I remember I had to make the decision. I needed to get prepared to evacuate, and I was having trouble with the insurance company, which is not unusual. So Brent, I had a friend. We had a young man that worked for us, and I left him with money. I left him with credit on his phone, and I said, if you need me, you call me. You said outside this surgery door, if there's anything that happens, you give me a call. And I ran to get our passports to get everything in order and began making plans with the evacuation people so that we could evacuate him. He came out of the surgery room, and they moved him back to the French clinic. And there, we had people coming from all over town, Christians that were coming and praying and worshiping God. In fact, the French doctor, he came to me, and he said, you have turned our hospital into a chapel, because there was so much prayer and worship going on. Every waiting room, every hallway had Christians that were there praying and worshiping God 24 hours a day. And God heard those prayers. It had not been that long before this happened that I had been reading a book about a missionary lady that had made the very tough decision to leave her children when she got on a plane with her husband that had had a heart attack, and she had to leave them in a remote village. And I remember that I thought I could never do that. But one thing I found about God is he gives us the strength we need at the moment we need it. Even when it's something we think we can't do, when the time comes, if we will rely on him, he will help us and help us do what we need to do. And I remember the decision was made that I would get on the evacuation plane with Brent. We all went to the airport. They took him out. They put him in blew this cocoon thing up around him and put him sideways, got him into the little medical plane. And I hugged my girls goodbye, leaving them in the care of a wonderful missionary that was going to bring them to Paris to meet up with us. And I boarded the plane with my husband. Shortly after the plane took off, the medics came and they said, "We've sedated your husband. He'll sleep until we get to Paris. We have a blanket, we have some food and a pillow for you. Why don't you rest?" And for the very first time in 48 hours, I began to weep. I covered my head. I had not shed one tear because God had given me the strength I needed for the moment I was in. But then I covered my head and I began to cry.
When we arrived in Paris, I kind of expected when they had the ambulance at the plane and took me straight to this nice hospital. It's the nicest private hospital in Paris. And I thought they would immediately rush me into surgery, and patch me up and everything. And I'm like in there all day. They just keep coming in like every hour checking my temperature. No one's like done anything. They haven't looked at, leg, nothing. And they keep calling my wife out. And what I didn't know is they were trying to get her to sign amputation orders, which I thank God she didn't do. And sometimes she can be stubborn. Sometimes it's a good thing. And so that doctor did everything to convince her to sign those papers, and she wouldn't do it. And finally he said, "Well, we don't have to have your approval to amputate if there's infection in the bone." So he said he was shot with AK-47 rounds. They're always dirty. The leg was open for hours. There will be infection. Of course, them letting me lay there all day didn't help. But they decided to send me back to the operating room, and I just remember at that hospital, they have a conveyor belt that they put you on, and then this belt takes you into the operating room. So it's like being on a luggage belt. Anyway, so I get taken into the operating room, and then they move me off the belt onto this operating table. And in the United States, they always put you out before you don't see the operating room. But in the French system, you're in the operating room when they put you under. And so because of the medical teams that I'd had and I'd been interpreting for, I look over and I see the instrument table and I see the saws that are there. And I realize, they're going to amputate my leg. So I remember as they were giving me the gas to put me out, I just prayed and I said to the Lord, "I thank you, Lord, for saving me. Thank you for everything you've done for me. And if you want me to preach your word on one leg, I'll preach on one leg." And I woke up and I was very surprised. My leg was still there. It had metal sticking out of it all over the place. It had a metal handle on the top. They'd put this fixator in, and I had a very upset French surgeon. He says, "You don't understand. It's medically impossible to fix your leg. You'll never walk on it. You'll never use it again. And now I've had to put this fixator in because your wife wouldn't sign the orders. And now when your leg gets amputated, you're going to lose more of your leg than you would have lost if you'd allowed me to amputate." And he's like, "Why were you in Niger? What were you doing there?" And I said, "Well, I'm planting churches." He looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, "Sir, you do realize that Niger is a Muslim country. And you say you're planting churches." I said, "Yes." He said, "Why would you be doing that?" I said, "Because God told me to." He said, "Well, wait a minute. I said, "What is it?" He said, "You talk to God?" I said, "Yes." He says, "Does he talk to you?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "You have bigger problems than your leg." He said, I don't know if you know this, but our hospital here has a reputation in Europe of having one of the best psychiatric departments in Europe." And he was very sincere. He said, "I want to help you and your family out." He says, "I will pay for your first consultation with our best doctor because you need help." Not everyone can understand what we do or why we do it. But there is a reason. And I thank God. Today, I thank God for the scars and for this leg. You see, he told me, "We can't fix you up here." So he said, kind of like punishment, in a few days when your levels are all stable, we're shipping you to Houston, Texas. I said, "Okay, ship me to Houston. It's okay." And I get to Houston, and I get in the American Medical Center and healthcare system. Of course, they redo all the tests and everything, and they come back and they tell me, the doctor tells me, he says, he shows me, he says, it's medically impossible for your leg to be saved. He said, there's parts missing. And he said, there's void in the bone. So he said, the bone can't repair itself. There's too much separation. But he said, we do have one positive thing. He said, we found your kneecap. I said, oh, really? He said, yeah. He said, when the bullet went through your knee, it knocked your kneecap around to the back side. And he said, in all of the operations and everything, he said, it was nestled in there. And he said, it's still viable. So he said, we've got a kneecap. I said, well, praise the Lord. And so he said, I'm going to put a plate in from your hip down to your knee and about 11 pins. He said, I'm going to pin the parts where they should be. But he said, there's going to be voids. And he said, we're going to put a brace on it. And he said, we're going to pray for 3 months. And he said, I am a believer like you are. And I believe nothing's impossible for God. And if God causes bone to grow where we know it doesn't grow, you'll keep your leg and you'll walk again. Otherwise, we'll have to amputate. So for 3 months, we prayed. And then we went back in for an x-ray. And he comes and he tells me, I don't know who's praying for you. Tell him to stop. I have never seen such bone production in all of my career. So I stand before you today on that leg, and I don't have any hardware in it. It's all been taken out. I don't have plates or pins. It's all healed up. I can't do an MRI because I have Toyota parts that are still in my knee. But Toyota makes good parts, so we're okay. But you know what? I thank God for what happened because God used it to open doors that I could have never imagined. When I went back to Niger, 9 months after rehabilitation, villages all along the Niger River from Niamey to the border of Mali, many of them in Tuareg country that had refused, the chiefs had refused that we ever preach there, witness, or do anything. They invited me to come and speak and to share my story because they said, you shouldn't be alive. God is with you. And then one day, it's been a couple years after all this happened, and I have an American team out, and we were doing some community work, and we were in a public school, and we were repainting this public school, and we're in this school working, and Shelly was all on my case not to run any good clothes, so I've got like my worst clothes on. In fact, I had this polo shirt that had a big hole under the one arm, but that's like extra, aeration, so I'm out there, it's hot, we're painting, and we're in the middle of working when all of a sudden this military vehicle shows up, and it's a general. And he's asking for me. And he finds me, and he says, the President of the Republic has summoned you to his office immediately. I said, excuse me? He said, yes, President Mamadou Tanja has summoned you to his office. You're to come with me immediately. I'm like, I'm not presentable. He says, I don't know about all that. He said, I'm just a military officer. I follow orders. And my orders are to find you and to bring you immediately to his office. So he gets me in his car. And I'm negotiating. I'm like, my house is like on the way. So okay, I'm a fast change. I said, I only need like 3 minutes. And I'm trying to talk with him. He said, you don't understand. If I'd have found you in your underwear, I'd be taking you in your underwear. I follow orders. So we get to the president's office, and I'm in the foyer. There's this white leather furniture, and I'm sitting there, and I'm so uncomfortable, and I'm afraid maybe there's going to be some paint transfer or something. I'm going to run the president's furniture, and I have to keep this arm down because I got a hole under it, and I'm so uncomfortable. And all of a sudden, this delegation from the European Union comes in in their suits, and I mean, they're spit and polish, and I'm like, whoa. And they're looking at me like, who is this guy? And I'm like ashamed. I can't look at them. And then the protocol come out and they say the president will receive you. And they make them wait. And they take me in. And the president of Niger at that time was like 6'2". He wore these big white robes and he's there to receive me. And he seats me and greets me and everything. I have no idea why I'm there. And he looks at me and he says, seems like you fully recovered. You weren't limping. And then he proceeds to tell me that when I was operated on at 3 a.m., it was his personal medical team that he sent to take care of me. And then he tells me, when you were in Paris, he said, I had my Secret Service contacting the hospital and checking up on your progress. And he said, when you went to the United States, we followed up there on your progress. And he says, we were very happy to see that you recovered. But he said, we were extremely surprised when you came back to continue to work in our country. So he said, since you've been back, he said, my Secret Service has been following you, and we've been following your ministry. And he said, we knew that you were painting a school this morning to help out a local community with a team from America. So he said, I sent my general to get you. And he said, I wanted him to bring you in your terrible clothes and sweaty and paint and everything that you have on you today, because he said, you see that delegation out there? They say they want to help my country, but for me to receive their help, I have to decide on what percentage of the sovereignty of this nation I'm willing to surrender. And he said, I wanted you here so that when you leave and they come in, I will tell them, there are some people that come to our country because of the love of God, and they serve and ask for nothing in return. I'm telling you, friends, we have a world that needs us. And you that are here tonight, if you're still breathing, then the Lord is saying to you tonight the same thing he said to me. Your mission is not over. There's still work to be done. You still have a part in it. Your mission is not over.